Story 1. The house that remembered everything. I was a property manager in New England. For 23 years, I've seen leaky basements, collapsing porches, and every kind of rodent infestation imaginable. But 17 Eldridge Street was different. It wasn't just a house. It was an archive of pain. The Victorian was gorgeous gingerbread trim, a wraparound porch, original stained glass. It had been vacant for a decade when our firm took it over for an elderly heir living abroad. My job was to assess repairs and get it ready for sale. The first thing I noticed when I unlocked the front door wasn't the dust or the smell of mildew. It was the temperature. It was July, sweltering outside, but inside felt like a crisp October evening. Not who's cool, seasonally cool. I figured it was just old construction, thick stone foundations. I started my inspection in the parlor. That's when I heard the first recording. It wasn't a ghostly moan. It was the distinct, crisp sound of a piano, a few bars of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer. It came from the corner where an old, sheet-covered shape sat. I pulled the sheet off, expecting a player piano. It was just a regular upright, keys yellowed with age. I pressed a key. The note was flat, the felt hammers brittle. This piano hadn't been tuned, let alone played, in decades. I wrote it off as a trick of the wind through loose floorboards, but as I moved through the house, the recordings kept playing. In the kitchen, I smelled bacon frying and heard the sizzle pop, the clatter of a pan. I turned, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a shimmer in the air by the old cast-iron stove, like heat haze. The smell vanished instantly. In a child's bedroom, painted with faded circus animals, I felt a sudden, irrational wave of intense sadness. Then, I heard it. The soft, rhythmic sound of someone crying. Not a child's wail, but the quiet, hopeless sobbing of an adult trying to muffle the sound in a pillow. The sound seemed to come from the bed itself. I'm not a sensitive man. I believe in pipes, drafts, and faulty wiring. But this was different. These weren't interactive hauntings. They weren't reacting to me. They were just playing, like a tape recorder made of plaster and memory. The worst was the master bedroom. I opened the door and was hit by the cloying scent of roses and camphor, the smell of a funeral home. The room was freezing. In the center of the room, the air seemed to thicken, to coalesce. And then I saw Itna, a full apparition, but an impression, like a afterimage burned into reality. A woman in a long, old-fashioned nightgown was hanging from the center beam. Her face was in shadow, but her bare feet, pale and limp, were perfectly clear. The scene held for maybe 3 seconds. Then it dissipated, and the room was just a dusty, empty bedroom again. I left. I told my boss the house had severe structural issues and needed a specialist inspection before we could proceed. Apo said back the heir was eager to sell. I finally broke down and told him what I'd seen and heard. He laughed, called me superstitious, and sent a young, eager new hire, Tim, to finish the assessment. A week later, Tim quit. He wouldn't give details, just said he wasn't going back into that house. My boss, frustrated, hired a tough-as-nails contractor, a guy named Mick, who seen it all to go in and start the renovation. Mick lasted 2 days. He found me at a job site, his usual bravado gone. His hands were shaking. The basement, he said, his voice low. I was down there checking the foundation. My radio was on. Some classic rock station. The signal cut out, and this other broadcast came through. Clear as a bell, it was a news report about the stock market crash, October 1929. The announcer was listing plummeting numbers, his voice getting more and more panicked. Then I heard a man's voice right next to my ear, whisper, "All gone." I dropped my damn flashlight and ran up those stairs. The house we eventually pieced together from historical records had been owned by one family, the Hargroves, from 1890 to 1978. They'd experienced almost every tragedy imaginable within its walls. A child lost to influenza, a suicide. The woman in the master bedroom was Eleanor Hargrove, 1932. Financial ruin in the Depression. A young man lost in Vietnam. The house wasn't haunted by a ghost trying to communicate. It was haunted by events. It had absorbed the emotional peaks of a century of suffering and played them back on a loop. A museum of misery trapped in amber. The heir finally sold it to a developer for land value. They bulldozed it. I drove by the empty lot a month later. It was just grass and rubble. But for a moment, standing by my car, I swear I heard, faint on the summer breeze, the distant, tinny sound of a ragtime piano. Story 2. The third passenger. My job involves a lot of solo driving consulting gigs up and down the California coast. I bought a reliable sedan, subscribed to every podcast, and settled into the rhythm of the road. That all changed after the accident on the Grapevine. It wasn't my accident. I was driving south on I-5 through the Tejon Pass. That long, steep, grinding stretch. Fog had rolled in, thick and cold. Up ahead, brake lights suddenly flared like a string of red Christmas bulbs. I slowed, crawling along until traffic stopped dead. Through the mist, I saw the flashing blues and reds of emergency vehicles. A semi had lost control, jackknifed her, and clipped several cars. It was a bad one. I sat in my car for over an hour, the wipers squeaking against the fogged glass. The radio was just static up in the pass. I felt a profound aeration trapped in my little metal box on the mountain, the mist swallowing the world beyond my headlights. A CHP officer finally came by, telling US HWDB, moving soon, to follow the pace car slowly through the wreckage. As we inched forward, I passed the carnage. One car, a small blue compact, was utterly crushed against the guardrail. The door was open, and the interior was dark, but the dome light was on, illuminating nothing, just a torn seat. A wave of nausea hit me. I looked away quickly, focusing on the taillights of the car ahead. Traffic cleared, and Primatus sped up, desperate to get off the mountain, down into the light and warmth of the valley. That's when I first felt it. The feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't a shape or a sound. It was a presence, a specific, localized coldness in the passenger seat. I glanced over. Empty. I shook it off as adrenaline and the creepy atmosphere, but the cold spot remained. For the next 50 miles, all the way to my hotel in Bakersfield, I felt watched. I'd catch a flicker in the rearview mirror, expecting to see a face in the back seat. Nothing was ever there. The next morning, the feeling was gone. I chalked it up to stress. But it happened again 2 weeks later, on a dark, rainy stretch of Highway 101 near Mon. 1 minute, I was alone, singing along to the radio. The next, That same invasive chill filled the passenger seat. This time, I heard something, a faint, rhythmic sound, like fingernails tapping on glass. It was coming from the passenger window. I looked. No fingers. Just the rain streaking down the glass. But the tapping continued, syncopated, anxious. Now I was scared. This wasn't my imagination. The car felt different, heavier, slower to respond. As if it were carrying extra weight, I pulled into the next brightly lit gas station and sat there, heart pounding, until dawn. As the sun rose, the cold and the tapping faded away. It became a pattern. The third passenger would appear on long, lonely, dark stretches of road, never in the city, never in daylight. It preferred rain, fog, the empty hours between midnight and 4 a.m. I stopped taking night drives. I started flying whenever possible. My breaking point came on a trip back from Oregon. I'd pushed too hard, trying to make it home, and found myself on a remote 2-lane highway through the redwood forests well after sunset. The trees formed a tunnel, swallowing all light, and it came back. This time, the cold was so intense I could see my breath. The tapping on the window was frantic, and then, over the hiss of my tires on wet asphalt, a new sound, a whisper. It wasn't in my ear, it was in the air of the car, a vibration in the molecules. A young woman's voice, choked with panic, repeating 2 words, "Not yet, not yet, not yet." I screamed. I slammed on the brakes, skidding on the shoulder. I flung open my door and stumbled out into the dripping, pitch-black forest. I left the car running, the door open, the interior light, a tiny beacon in the immense darkness. I stood there shaking for 10 minutes before I had the courage to look back inside. It was empty. Just my car. The cold was gone. The whispering had stopped. I drove the rest of the way home in a terrified haze, every shadow a potential shape. I sold that car the very next week, taking a huge loss. I told the dealer there was a weird draft from the passenger side. I did some morbid digging later. The accident on the grapevine. The crushed blue car. The driver, a 22-year-old woman named Chloe, had died at the scene. She'd been a nursing student, driving home to see her parents. The news article quoted her mother. "She called us just before the pass. She said she was tired and the fog was bad, but she wanted to get home. She said, 'Don't worry, I'll be there soon.' I'm not ready for this trip to be over yet. Not yet." I think Chloe, in that finale, terrifying moment of impact, didn't know she was dead. All she knew was the car, the road, and the desperate desire to get home. And in her panic, her spirit didn't flee to some afterlife. It latched on to the first open, moving vehicle that passed by her wreck. She became a hitchhiker from the moment of her death, forever trying to finish that last trip home, appearing in any car that matched the conditions of her final, fatal drive. Darkness, bad weather, lonely roads. I have a new car now. I only drive during the day, but sometimes when I'm on a long, straight road at dusk and the shadows start to lengthen, I'll feel a sudden, brief chill from the passenger seat. I'll turn the radio up loud, roll down the window for fresh air, and whisper to the empty seat, "It's okay, Chloe. The trip's over. You can go home now." I don't know if it helps, but the chill always fades. Story 3, The reflection in the school window, Maple Creek Elementary, was torn down in 2005. They built a bright community center in its place. Good riddance. That school was wrong. Everyone who went there in the 80s and early 90s knows it, though most of us never talk about it. It was an old building from the 1920s, with high ceilings, dark wood floors that creaked, and those tall, multi-pane windows you could barely see out of. My classroom, Mrs. Henderson's 4th grade, was at the end of the second-floor hallway. The window there looked out over the back of the school, though overgrown baseball field and the woods beyond. The rule was simple, passed down from older kids. Never look at the window's reflection after 3 p.m. If you did, you wouldn't see the reflection of the classroom behind you. You'd see another classroom. Same layout, same desks, but empty, dark, and covered in a thick layer of dust. And in your seat, in that reflected classroom, would be you. But a wrong you. A still, pale you with dark, hollow eyes, just staring back at the real you. It wasn't a one-time ghost story. It was a consistent, replicable phenomenon. Every kid in that class discovered it eventually. Usually by accident. You'd be packing your bag, glance at the window as the sun slanted in, and freeze. The first time it happened to me, I dropped my pencil case. The me in the window didn't move. It just stared, its head slightly tilted. The trick was to break the connection. You had to look away immediately, before it could— What? We didn't know. The older kids' stories were vague, but terrifying. Jacob Parker looked too long in '79, and he was out sick for a week, came back quiet. Sarah Mill's reflection smiled at her, and she moved away that summer. The school staff knew about the window. Te Mustabe, Mrs. Henderson always closed the blinds on that window promptly at 2:45 p.m. Every single day, without fail. She never gave a reason. If a kid yelped or pointed, she'd just say sharply, "Eyes on your work, please." The collective fear gave it power. We developed rituals. We'd warn new kids in hushed tones on the playground. We'd never sit with our backs to that window after lunch. We'd walk a wide berth around that side of the room. The window became a living entity to us, a silent member of the class. The incident that ended it all happened in 1994 to a boy named Derek. He was a skeptic, a tough kid who laughed at our baby stories. One afternoon, as Mrs. Henderson was writing on the board, he dared himself. He turned and stared directly into the window right as the clock ticked to 3:07 p.m. We all saw him do it. He smirked at first. Then his smile faded. His eyes widened. He leaned closer to the glass, his breath fogging it. Then he screamed a raw, terrified sound that tore through the quiet classroom. He was pointing at the window, babbling. "She's there! She's in my seat! She's got my face, but it's rotting. She's mouthing words." Mrs. Henderson rushed over, grabbed him by the shoulders, and physically turned him away from the window. She was white as a sheet. She sent him to the nurse immediately. Derek was out for 3 days. When he came back, he was a ghost of himself. He wouldn't go near that side of the room. He'd flinch if sunlight hit a puddle a certain way. He never said what he saw, the she in the window, mouthing. A week later, parents complained. Derek's mother was furious, demanding to know what had traumatized her son. The school's solution was not an exorcism or an investigation. They boarded up the window from the outside with a sheet of plywood painted white. Who's like that our monster was sealed away, but it felt like a surrender, not a victory. We just walled up a hungry thing in the dark. The atmosphere in the room didn't improve. It grew heavier, more what. The feeling of being stared at from the blank, white-covered window was worse than seeing the reflection. The school closed for good a few years later due to asbestos, they said. I think they just wanted an excuse to bury the place. I drove by during the demolition. I watched the wrecking ball take a swing at the second floor, right where our classroom was. As the wall crumbled, I swear I saw, for just a frame in the cloud of dust, the silhouette of a tall window and in it, the faint, pale smudge of a child's face, looking out. Then it was gone, buried under tons of brick and memory. We all carry a little of that window inside us. I still can't look at my own reflection in a dark pane of glass. I'm always afraid I'll see the other me, the one from the dusty classroom, waiting for me to finally meet its eyes. Story 4. The Station Agent of Nowhere. My brother Leo was a rail fun obsessed with trains. For his 30th birthday, he planned the ultimate trip, photographing abandoned railway stations along a decommissioned line in the Appalachian foothills. He wanted me to come as his spotter and skeptic. I agreed, thinking it would be a fun, quirky road trip. It was neither. We found the old station on the third day. It was Cahed Millwood Crossing on Leo's faded map. But no town was left, just the skeleton of a station house. Its roof caved in, nestled in a valley so deep the sunlight barely reached the tracks. The air was dead still and thick with the smell of damp leaves and decay. Leo was ecstatic, setting up his tripod. I felt a deep. Primal unease. The place felt watched, not by an animal, but by something that understood what we were. That's when we saw the man. He stood on the far platform, which was less dilapidated than ours. He wore a crisp, old-fashioned railway uniform, a dark blue jacket with brass buttons, a cap, and striped trousers. He held a lantern. Though it was midday, he was perfectly still, looking down the overgrown tracks as if waiting for a train. "Holy crap!" Leo whispered, raising his camera. "Out here?" "Leo, don't," I said. The man was too clean, too pristine for this place of ruin. His uniform looked new. The lantern glass was unsmudged. Leo clicked the shutter. The sound echoed oddly in the silent valley. The man turned his head, not his body, just his head, in a slow, smooth motion. His face was pale, expressionless, with deep shadows under his eyes. He looked directly at Leo Essick amid a lens. Then he raised his free arm and pointed, not at us, down the empty track to the east. "What's he pointing at?" Leo muttered, snapping more photos. I heard it then, a distant, mournful sound that raised every hair on my body. A train whistle, but it wasn't the sharp blast of a modern diesel. It was the long, low, haunting whistle of a steam locomotive. It echoed through the valley, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. The station agent's lips moved. He mouthed a single word, which I read clearly from across the gap. "Departing." The whistle blew again. Closer now. The ground began to vibrate. Not a faint tremor, but a deep, rhythmic chug-chug-chug that shook the rotting boards beneath our feet. I saw dust puff up from the tracks. I smelled it hot oil, coal, smoke, and steam. This is impossible," Leo yelled, but his voice was filled with awe, not fear. He kept taking pictures, aiming down the track. I looked. The tracks were still overgrown with weeds, but the air above them shimmered like a heat haze, but coiling into a distinct shape, the shape of a massive black locomotive, billowing spectral smoke, charging down tracks that hadn't felt a train's weight in 60 years. It was silent, except for that overwhelming chugging and the deafening whistle. It was a ghost, but it exerted physical force. The wind of its passage whipped our hair, and the smell of cinders was overpowering. It was coming right for the station. The station agent lowered his lantern, his face serene. He was waiting to board. "Leo, run!" I screamed, grabbing his arm. He finally broke his trance. We stumbled off the platform into the thorny brush, scrambling up the steep embankment. I looked back once. The ghost train was passing through the station. It didn't stop. It didn't even slow. It roared through, a tsunami of sound and phantom metal. And the station agent, he didn't get on. As the engine passed him, he simply dissolved. His uniform, his lantern, his body all unraveled like smoke in the wind, sucked into the wake of the passing train. Then the train was gone, fading into the woods, its whistle dying away to a sad echo. Silence crashed back. The smells vanished. The vibrations stopped. We sat in the brambles, breathing heavily. Leo's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his camera. We didn't speak. We just climbed back to our car and drove, not stopping until we hit a busy highway. Days later, Leo developed the film. He refused to go digital for his art. The photos of the valley, the station all normal, the photos he took of the agent and the approaching train, blank, overexposed white frames, as if the film had been blasted with pure light. All except one, the last picture he took as we ran. It showed the empty platform, but in the upper corner, where the agent had been standing, there was a faint, gray smudge. And if you squinted, the smudge looked like a man's face, mouth open in what could have been a scream or a sigh of relief. Leo researched it obsessively afterward. He found a tiny mention in a regional archive. In 1953, a station agent named Walter P. Ellis was listed as missing from Millwood Crossing. He'd been last seen on the platform, waiting for the nightly freight. The train's engineer reported seeing him there, lantern raised, as they passed through without stopping. He was never seen again. We understood then. Walter wasn't a ghost haunting a place. He was a soul stuck in a moment to moment. He realized the train wasn't stopping. The moment he was left behind forever. Every day, in that sunless valley, he reenacted his final hope and his ultimate abandonment, waiting for a train that would never stop, destined to be perpetually consumed by its passing. Leo sold all his railfan equipment a month later. He says he still hears train whistles at night, sometimes, but they're always moving away, getting fainter and fainter, until they're just a memory of a sound he can't quite place. Story 5. The bottle collector. I've worked for the county sanitation department for 15 years. My route is the backroads, the winding, wooded lanes, where people's trash is more personal, less curated. You see a different side of life from the cab of a garbage truck. You also find strange things people toss out, or lose, or hide. It started in the fall, on Hemlock Ridge Road, a dead-end lane with maybe 5 houses scattered over 2 miles. I was finishing my run, the truck groaning as it compacted the last bin when I saw a flash of green in the ditch. Not beer bottle green. Deeper, like old sea glass. I stopped, more out of professional tidiness than curiosity, and hopped down to pick it out. It wasn't a beer or soda bottle. It was a small, elegantly shaped glass flask, corked with a wax seal. It felt healy. Inside, rolled tightly, was a piece of parchment. I almost tossed it back. Then something stopped me. The date. It was written in fine, spidery ink on the outside of the parchment, visible through the glass. October 17th, 1912. Intrigued, I carefully broke the wax seal. The parchment unfurled. The handwriting was the same formal, cop. I, Thomas J. Albright, confess that on this day I did knowingly sell diseased livestock to my neighbor, Joseph Carr. The cows died within the fortnight, and he, believing it a blight of God, took his own life from the financial ruin. His blood is on my hands, and the silence of this wood shall be my only confessor. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air went through me. It felt too specific, too real to be a prank. Who would plant a fake 1912 confession bottle in a ditch in 2023? I took the bottle home, placing it on my shelf as a morbid curiosity. The following Thursday, on the same route, I saw another one. A sapphire blue bottle, half buried in the moss at the base of an old oak, about a quarter mile from the first find. This one was dated June 5th, 1934. I, Eleanor Shaw, confess that I saw the Miller boy fall through the ice on the pond last winter. I was gathering kindling. I heard his cries. I could have run for help, but I did not. I stood behind a tree and watched the bubbles stop. His mother gave me a black ribbon to wear at the funeral. I wear it still. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. I started actively looking. I'd walk sections of the ditch line during my breaks. Over the next month, I found 7 more bottles. Each was a different, beautiful color: amber, violet, milky white. Each contained a confession dated decades apart, describing a hidden sin from the area's history. A doctor who poisoned a rival in 1898. A minister who stole the church building fund in 1955. Teenager who caused a fatal car crash in 1971 and fled. The confessions were all written in the same style, but different hands. And they all shared a terrifying detail. They ended with a promise of secrecy to the woods, and a palpable, lingering guilt that seeped from the parchment. I became obsessed. I visited the County Historical Society, cross-referencing names and dates. Thomas Albright was a real farmer in the 1910 census. Joseph Carr's obituary from 1912 listed sudden financial despair. Eleanor Shaw was in the 1930 census as a seamstress. The Miller boy's drowning was a brief, tragic note in a 1933 newspaper. Every confession checked out with some fragment of forgotten local history. The bottles were appearing more frequently now, and the dates were creeping forward. I found a bottle from 1988, then 1999, then 2015. The scenes became more modern: embezzlement, hit and run, betrayal. The handwriting grew less formal, but the tone of wretched guilt remained. The dread solidified 2 weeks ago. I found the newest bottle. It wasn't in the ditch. It was sitting neatly on the lid of a garbage bin at the very last house on Hemlock Ridge. A house I'd serviced 4 years. The bottle was jet black. The date on the parchment was next Thursday's date. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I broke the seal. I, Michael Rourke. That's my name. Confess that my curiosity has opened a door that should have remained shut. I read the confessions of the dead and the guilty, and in doing so, I have become the next confessor. I do not know the sin I will commit, but the woods have shown me its end. On Thursday, I will be on this road. I will swerve to avoid a deer that is not there. My truck will leave the road at the bend by the old oak. I will not survive. This is my confession for a sin not yet committed, written in the past tense of a future I cannot avoid. The silence of this wood is now mine. I read it 5 times, the words swimming. It was my handwriting, not an imitation. My exact, messy scrawl. The bottle felt like ice in my hand. I quit my job that afternoon. I've packed my bags. I'm leaving tonight, 2 days before the date on the bottle. I'm moving across the country. I've sold my truck, but as I sit here writing this, I keep looking out the window at the woods that border my property. They've always been just trees. Now, they feel like a waiting audience. And I have this terrible, gnawing thought. What if the sin isn't the accident? What if the sin is running? What if by trying to escape the future, the bottle showed me? I am actually fulfilling the confession, becoming a man so consumed by guilt and fear that he abandons his life, a living ghost. The black bottle sits on my desk. I can't bring myself to smash it. It feels like smashing my own headstone. Tomorrow, I'll be gone. But I know, with a certainty that chills my soul, that somewhere on a road I've never driven, in a ditch I'll never see, a bottle will appear, and inside, written in my hand, will be the true story of what I did next. Story 6. The sub-basement security work is 95% profound boredom, 4% dealing with drunk idiots trying to get back into their office for a forgotten phone, and 1% pure, undiluted terror. I hit that 1% in the Crestview Tower. Crestview is a 40-story glass and steel needle, all hedge funds and tech startups. My job was the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I had a routine, perimeter check, lobby desk, camera review, a walk-through every 5 floors. Repeat. The elevator was my companion. Its panel was simple. L for lobby, B1 for parking, B2 for utilities, then 1 through 40. One night, around 2:30 a.m., during a slow camera scan, I saw a flicker of movement in the elevator lobby on the 20th floor. Just a blur. I switched to the elevator's interior camera. Empty? Must have been a glitch. But when I glanced at the elevator control display on my security panel, which shows the car's position, I froze. It read, SB. There is no SB. I know the building specs. I've seen the blueprints. Basement uno. Basement 2. That's it. Sub-basement isn't a thing. I radioed the other guard, Marty, who was doing an exterior patrol. Hey, you seeing this? Elevator showing SB stutter crackled. SBU mean B. 2. You need more coffee. Man, no. It says SB, clear as day. Panels, glitching. Old building, ignore it. The elevator began to move. The number changed from SB to B2, then B1, then L. The doors in the lobby slid open. It was empty. Primera, haloelegde, over feeling foolish. I stepped inside and looked at the panel. The buttons glowed. Be those. B1, L1. Menos 40, no SBI. Shrugged, putting it down to a software bug. But it happened again the next week. And the week after that. Always between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. The car would go to SB, sit for a few minutes, then return. The interior camera during these trips showed only an empty elevator car. My curiosity mixed with the soul-crushing boredom got the better of me. I decided to catch it. One night, when the elevator was parked in the lobby, I pulled out the maintenance key that overrides the call buttons. Primera inserted it, turned it to manual holds, and carefully pressed the door close button, then the B2 button. I then swiftly turned the key to call cancel and pressed B2 again. In some older systems, this sequence can sometimes reveal hidden service floors if you time it right. The elevator jerked and began to descend. Past B1. Past B2. The floor indicator went blank. We were going down further. A soft, mechanical hum replaced the usual roar. The air in the car grew colder, carrying a faint, new smell-old paper, polished wood, and a hint of cigar smoke. The elevator slowed and stopped. The door slid open silently. I was not in a concrete utility basement. I was in a lobby. A breathtaking, opulent lobby from another century. The walls were dark mahogany, adorned with Art Deco sconces casting a warm, low glow. A plush crimson carpet ran down a short corridor. I could hear Musica, live jazz band playing a slow, smoky tune. Laughter and the clink of glasses echoed from around the corner. My mind scrambled for logic, a secret clue, a preservationist's insane project buried under a skyscraper. I took a hesitant step out of the elevator. The doors didn't close behind me. The air was warm and alive. I followed the sound. The corridor opened into a large, low-ceilinged room. It was a speakeasy. Round, topless people in 1920s, finery flapper dresses, sharp tuxedos. A band played on a small stage. A bar stretched along one wall. A bartender in a vest polishing a glass. Everyone was talking, dancing, drinking. The scene was vibrant, perfect, and no one noticed me. I stood there in my cheap security uniform, a ghost from the future. I took another step. A woman in a beaded dress passed right through the space where my arm was, laughing at something her companion said. She didn't flinch. They weren't ignoring me. I was invisible to them. This wasn't a hidden room. It was a recording, a phantom imprint, a memory of a place, playing on a loop. The relief was short-lived. I moved to the center of the room, watching the ghosts of the Jazz Age revel. Then the music began to slow. The saxophonist's notes grew long and distorted. The laughter died down, not to silence, but to a low, uniform murmur. One by one, the dancers stopped. They turned their heads. The people at the bar swiveled on their stools. Every single person in the room was now looking directly at me. Their faces, which had been lively and animated, were slack, empty. Their eyes were dark pools. The music had stopped. The only sound was the hum of the old lights The bartender put down his glass. He pointed at me with a long, pale finger. A man in a tuxedo by the stage took a step toward me. Then a woman. Then the whole crowd began to move, shuffling in a silent, concerted mass. Their mouths were closed, but a pressure began to build in my skull, a psychic whisper, a chorus of dead thoughts. Stay. Join the party. It's always midnight here. I ran. I barreled back down the crimson carpet, the shuffling footsteps behind me, the psychic whisper becoming a dull roar in my mind. The elevator doors were still open. I leaped inside, slamming my hand against the old button. The doors began to close. A pale, many-ringed hand shot between them, stopping them. The blank face of a flapper stared in at me. I kicked out, my boot connecting with nothing but cold air, but the hand retracted. The doors sealed. The elevator shot upward. I collapsed against the wall, gasping. The floor indicator blinked. B2, B1, Ele. When the doors opened on the bright, empty modern lobby, I sobbed with relief. I never filed a report. What would I say? I disabled the elevator override sequence and vowed never to touch it again. But sometimes, on the quietest part of my shift, I'll stand in the lobby and look at the elevator panel, and I'll wonder. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were lonely. They'd been dancing for a century with no audience, and in that moment I broke through. I became the most interesting thing to happen in their eternity. The thought that scares me most isn't that they might get out, it's that someday the boredom up here might get so bad that I'm tempted to go back down, just to have someone to look at me. Story 7. The Echo wife Clara died suddenly. An aneurysm. 1 minute she was laughing about a typo in a restaurant menu. The next minute, she was gone. The silence that filled our house after was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. A month after the funeral, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. 2:18 a.m. The screen showed Clara Mobile. My heart stopped. Then logic kicked in. A wrong number. A wrong number. A cruel prank. The phone company hadn't disconnected her line yet. I let it go to voicemail. An overlater. Curiosity and a desperate, pathetic hope overcame me. I dialed my voicemail. There was a new message. I pressed play. Hey, just leaving the grocery store. You would not believe the line at checkout. It's like everyone decided to buy ingredients for a mystery casserole tonight. Anyway, I got that weird mustard you like. Don't worry. I hid it behind the pickles, so you'll have to search. See you soon. Love you. It was Clara's voice. Not a recording, I remembered. It was fresh, casual, alive. She mentioned the Mastadas to bed. Ongoing joke from 2 weeks before she died. I listened to it 20 times. I cried. Then I got angry. Who was doing this? The next night, another call. 9:07 p.m. Ooga, just finished that awful quarterly report. My eyes are crossing. Making tea. That new detective show is on in 10 minutes. Saved you the spot on the couch, but if you're late, the cat gets it. The awful quarterly report was a project she'd been complaining about the week she died. The detective show premiered yesterday. This wasn't a stored recording. It was current. It was reporting on a day she was having. I called the phone company, furious, demanding to know who had her number. They confirmed the number was still in my name. inactive, no forwarding, no calls had been made from it on their logs. The voicemails, they suggested, must be coming from my own phone's storage, but they weren't. I hired a tech-savvy friend, David. He set up a trace on my phone line. The next time Clara called, at 4:30 p.m. the following afternoon, he was ready. The voicemail was about her dentist appointment running late. David's equipment lit up. The signal's weak, but it's local, he said, frowning at his laptop. Really local? It's coming from your house. Mark, what? The triangulation is fuzzy, but the point of origin is within 100 feet of where we're sitting. We searched the house. Nothing. No hidden phones, no devices. David left, baffled and unsettled. That night, I got a new kind of message. It was different. The background noise was familiar, the hum of our fridge, the particular creak of the floorboard by the kitchen sink. In the message, Clara sounded confused. Mark, are you home? I thought I heard you come in. I'm in the kitchen. Where are you? A jolt of pure terror went through me. She wasn't just narrating her day. Se was Eri in our house, living a day from before she died, and she was sensing my presence now. I had to see. I took my phone, opened the voice recorder, and walked slowly through the house, following the geography of her last voicemail. I played it again as I walked. I'm in the kitchen. Where are you? As her recorded voice said kitchen, I stepped into our kitchen. It was empty, but my phone's voice recorder, still running, picked up a faint, secondary layer. Under the playback of her voicemail, the sensitive mic captured a whispery echo. Are you? It was live. It was in the room with me. I whispered, Clara. The air grew cold by the fridge. On my phone's recorder, a new, shuddering breath was captured, a sound, not from the voicemail. A spike of electromagnetic static made the lights flicker. I ran to the basement, to the old networking cabinet where our internet and phone lines came in. Maybe there was a feedback loop somehow pulling old data. As I knelt, my phone buzzed. A new voicemail. I played it, my hand shaking, the basement lights flickering. Is that you futzing with the router again? I swear, if you break the internet before my show, I'm divorcing you. Come back up. It's creepy down there. She was reacting to me. In real time, but from a day in her past. I was a ghost in her world. A glitch in her last perfect week. The final message came the next day. The date, inferred from her chatter, was the day of her aneurysm. She was describing making breakfast, humming. The message was normal, sunny. Then, at the very end, her voice changed. It became quiet, thoughtful. You know, I had the strangest dream last night. That you were here, but you were sad. And you were trying to talk to me, but I couldn't hear you. It felt so real. Anyway, I love you a lot. More than mustard. The call ended. That was the last voicemail. She would have collapsed an hour later in the restaurant. I finally understood. Clara wasn't haunting me. I was haunting her. Her spirit, or a recording of her consciousness, was trapped in a perfect, happy loop of her final days in this house. My grief, my presence, was a dark static bleeding into her bright recording. I was the ghost in her machine. I moved out a week later. The voicemails stopped. The house is empty now. For sale. Sometimes I think about the new owners. I wonder if on quiet nights they'll ever hear faint, happy chatter from an empty kitchen, or feel a cold spot by the fridge that smells like Clara's perfume. And I hope they never feel the crushing loneliness of being the only one who knows the conversation is over, and that they're just eavesdropping on a happiness that's forever out of reach. I keep the last voicemail saved. I listen to it sometimes, not to the beginning, but to the very end. After more than mustard, there's a 3-second pause before the beep. If you turn the volume all the way up, in that silence, you can just barely hear it. A soft, sad sigh, and a singly whispered word that doesn't belong to her past, but to my present. Goodbye. Story 8. The roadside crosses movement. My daughter Lily died on Route 9. At the bend where the old oak grows. Drunk driver, head on. The cross we placed there, white wood. Her name in pink was my only tether to the spot where her light went out. I'd go every Sunday, replace the flowers, talk to her. Then, one Monday morning, it was gone, not vandalized. Gone. The ground was undisturbed. No hole. No broken pieces. I was furious, heartbroken. Who would do that? I drove into town, bought new materials, and built another cross that afternoon. I anchored it deep. On Wednesday, it was gone too. This time, a neighbor, Mrs. Gable, saw me staring at the empty spot. She approached, wringing her hands. "It's not kids, Sam," she said softly. It's been happening for years. Not often, but sometimes the crosses move. Down the road, about 100 feet or so, east toward town. My husband's marker did it. Back in '08. We thought we were going crazy until we found it, fresh as the day we put it in, stuck in the ditch a ways down. Drove east, exactly 103 paces down the road. In the tall grass of the ditch, I found Lily's cross, and the first one I'd made. They were side by side, clean, upright, as if freshly planted. The flowers were gone. This wasn't grief playing tricks. This was a phenomenon. I decided to watch. I told my boss I was sick, parked my truck in a hidden pull-off in the woods across the road, and waited with a thermos of coffee and a night vision camera. The first 2 nights, nothing. Just the sound of crickets and the occasional car. On the 3rd night, the moon was a sliver. The world was ink and shadow. Around 2 a.m., the temperature in my truck dropped sharply. My breath fogged the window. They appeared at the bend. Not one. Several. Silvery, translucent figures, shimmering like heat haze. I saw a man in 70s style clothing, a teenager in a letterman's jacket, a woman in a long coat, and Lily, my Lily, in the jeans and sparkly top she'd worn that night. They weren't looking at each other. They were all looking at their own crosses, which now glowed with a faint, milky light. As one, they moved. They didn't walk. They drifted to their respective crosses. They didn't touch them with hands. They bent. And with an effort that was clear even in their ghostly forms, they lifted them. Not the physical wood, the ghost of the cross, the memory of it. The physical cross remained, dark and inert, carrying their glowing, spectral markers, They began to drift down the road, east toward town. Their faces were set in expressions of profound concentration, or maybe pain. It was a silent, mournful procession. Lily was at the back. I saw her small form struggle with the weight of her glowing cross. I couldn't stand it. I forgot my fear. I threw open the truck door and ran across the road. "Lily! Baby! Stop!" She froze. They all froze. Slowly, they turned. I saw their faces now. Not peaceful, not angry. Frustrated. The man from the 70s had tears of silver light on his cheeks. The woman looked exhausted. Lily looked at me. Her eyes, which had been vacant, focused. Recognition dawned. Then sadness. She shook her head slowly. She mouthed a word. "Go." The man in the Letterman jacket made a sharp, urgent gesture down the road. "This way." Then the woman in the coat pointed back to the bend, to the site of the crashes. Her finger trembled. "Primera. Hunde. Orstud." They weren't moving the crosses to be cruel or random. They were trying to move past it. They were trapped, not at the point of death, but in the moment of impact, the catastrophic end of their journey. The cross was a pin, marking them to that spot. By moving its spiritual representation, they were trying, with infinite slowness, to complete their trip. To get past the bend, to go home. But the physical cross remained, anchoring them, pulling them back. It was a Sisyphean task. Every time a loved one replaced the cross, they had to start over. Lily gave me one last, longing look, then turned and continued her slow, arduous drift down the road, the ghost light of her cross casting her face in soft relief. The others followed. I stood there until they faded from sight. The cold lifted. Dawn began to bleach the sky. I went back to the bend. I uprooted Lily's physical cross. I didn't throw it away. It took it home. I don't put flowers on the roadside anymore. Instead, every Sunday, I walk 100 feet east of the bend and leave a single pink rose in the ditch. It's always gone by Monday, Mrs. Gable says. The other crosses have stopped moving too. The families, once they understood, took them down. Route 9's bend is unmarked now. Just a curve in the road. But sometimes, very late. If you're driving east toward town and your headlights catch the mist just right, you might see them. Faint, determined shapes, walking steadily, unburdened, finally moving on, getting farther from that bend with every passing year. Story 9. The library's uncatalogued section. The town library was my sanctuary, a Carnegie building from 1911, all dusty sunlight and the smell of old paper. I worked there part-time while in college. Miss Eloise, the head librarian who'd been there since the Dewey Decimal System was a fresh idea, showed me the ropes. On my third day, she took me to the non-fiction stacks. Third floor, the philosophy and psychology section. It was a dead zone. "Now, the most important rule," she said, her voice dropping. She placed her hand on a massive wooden bookshelf labeled Metaphysics 100 to 199. "This case is on rollers. We move it once a month for cleaning. But you must never, ever look behind it. Do you understand?" "What's behind it?" I asked. Her face was solemn. "The uncatalogued section. Books that don't belong in the system. They're not for patrons. They're not for us. We just make sure the shelf stays closed. It was the most fascinating thing I'd ever heard. A secret in a library. For weeks, it was all I thought about. What could be back there? Forbidden knowledge, erotic etchings, town secrets. One Tuesday night, I was closing alone. The library was empty, a cathedral of silence. The temptation was a physical ache. I went to the 3rd floor. I put my shoulder to the metaphysics case. It rolled more easily than I expected, revealing a narrow, dark space behind it. A door. Not a modern one. An old oak door with a tarnished brass knob. My heart hammered. I turned the knob. It was unlocked. The room was small, windowless, lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves. But these weren't normal books. They were huge, bound in what looked like dark leather, with no titles on the spines. I pulled down volume 007. It was heavy. I opened it. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten in a dense, uniform script. It was a biography, but not a normal one. It read like an internal monologue. Juni 4, 1998, thought about Mrs. Henderson's apple pie and felt a pang of jealousy, wished for a fleeting second that she would choke on it. November 12, 2005. Lied to David about working late, sat in the parking lot for an hour, thinking of Jenny from the gym. Asterisk, February 29, 2020. Stole a $5 bill from the donation jar at the coffee shop, rationalized it as a service fee for listening to the barista's problems. Asterisk, it was a record of every petty, mean, shameful, or secret thought a person had ever had. A ledger of the hidden self. I slammed it shut, my face burning. I checked the number on the shelf. 007. I knew who Resident 007 was. It was Mr. Beecher, the kindly retired postman who gave out candy canes at Christmas. Trembling, I searched for my own family. I found my mother's volume. I read one line of private fear about my father is Sahel. She'd never voiced and felt like a violator. It was all there. Every unkind childhood thought, every teenage lust, every adult envy and cowardice, written in a script that was not my handwriting, but somehow was. It went right up to the present. The last entry was dated today, April 15, las 8:37 p.m. considers violating Miss Eloise's trust to look behind the shelf. Curiosity wars with guilt. Guilt is losing. It was being written as I stood there. I watched, hypnotized, as the ink seemed to wet itself on the page, forming new words in real time. April 15, las 8:49 p.m. stands in the uncatalogued section, reading his own volume. Feels profound shame and a thrilling sense of power. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a history. It was a live feed. The library wasn't storing books. It was transcribing souls. I heard a noise behind me. Miss Eloise stood in the doorway, her face not angry, but infinitely sad. I told you not to look. What is this? I whispered. The town's conscience, she said softly. Or its curse. Some say the library was built on a crossing of ley lines that records thought. Others say it's just a place that attracts truth. These books write themselves. We don't know how. Our only job is to keep them contained. Knowledge this intimate, it's corrosive. Does everyone know? No. And they mustn't. Imagine if you could read your neighbors, your spouse's, your child's book. Society would crumble in a week. She took the volume from my hands and slid it back onto the shelf. Now you know your own truth, Sam. Every dark corner. Can you live with that? And can you live with knowing everyone else's is right here and never look again? She rolled the bookshelf back into place, sealing the door. I quit the next day. I avoid the library now, but the knowledge is inside me, a worm in the core of my being. I look at people, my friends, my parents, strangers on the street, and I don't see their faces. I see their volume number. Primera Wanda, what is written on the pages right now. The temptation to go back to look up specific numbers is a constant whisper. Worst of all, I feel a new entry being written in my own book every second of every day, and I know the last line is already there, waiting for me to live my way to it. The final, awful truth of my life, written in a secret room by an unseen hand. Sometimes, in my dreams, I'm back in that room, and all the books are open, and their pages are whispering to each other, a deafening chorus of the town's hidden heart, and my own voice is the loudest of all. Story 10. The Drowning Pools. The drought had lasted 3 years. The reservoir was a cracked mud. Lawns were graves of brown straw. Water was rationed. You could shower on Tuesdays and Saturdays. The town of Mercy, Arizona, was dying of thirst. Then the pools appeared. Not rain, not leaks, perfectly circular pools, 10 feet across, in random backyards. They appeared overnight, filled with water so clear and still, it looked like glass. And it was cold, bone-knockingly cold, even in the 110-degree desert heat. Old Man Jenkins found the first one where his cactus garden had been. He called the news, thinking it a miracle. They took samples. The water was pure, distilled H2O. No minerals, no life, no source. It defied physics. Then the children started gathering around them. They wouldn't swim. They'd just sit at the edge, legs in the cold water, and stare down into the impossible depths. They said they could see lights moving far below. They whispered that the lady in the deep was singing to them. My son, Charlie, was 8. He came home from playing at the miller's house, his eyes wide. She says we're so thirsty, he told me. She says she understands. She can help. Who? Charlie. The lady. She's down in their pool. She's really pretty and sad. Fear, colder than the pool water, trickled down my spine. We banned Charlie from going near any of the pools. So did other parents. But the pull was magnetic. Kids would sneak out at night. They'd be found asleep by the water's edge, shivering, mumbling about beautiful songs. The town council, desperate, hired a geologist, Dr. Armitage. He lowered sensors into the pool in the Johnson's yard. The sonar didn't find a bottom. It just kept going, straight down, far beyond any possible aquifer. The temperature dropped to near freezing 100 feet down, and the sensors picked up movement. Large, slow, shifting shapes in the darkness. It's not water, Dr. Armitage said at the emergency town meeting, his face pale. not as we understand it. It's a manifestation. A tear. The drought. The collective thirst. The history of this desert. I think it's answered. Answered how? The mayor asked, by giving us what we wished for. Water. But it's not giving it from somewhere else. It's pulling it from us. That's when Mrs. Gable screamed. Her son, Timmy, was missing. We found him by the pool in their backyard. He was on his knees, leaning so far over the edge, he was almost inverted. He wasn't moving. We pulled him back. He was alive, but his skin was wrinkled, pruned all over, as if he'd been submerged for days. His lips were blue, and he was lighter, as if some of his mass was gone. He was dehydrated. Severely. But he'd been sitting next to an endless supply of water. He woke up in the hospital, frantic. "She was thirsty," he cried. "She's been thirsty for so long. She just wanted a little drink." I told her it was okay. The lady wasn't a person. Dr. Armitage's theory solidified. The pools were pores. The lady was the consciousness of the desert, itself not the sand and rock, but the thirst, the collective memory of every animal that died of dehydration, every plant that withered, every human who perished on a trail with an empty canteen. That agony had coalesced into a sentient hunger. The drought had given it strength. Our own desperate longing for water had acted as a beacon, and it had answered by creating wells not to quench us, but to connect to us, to siphon the very moisture from our bodies, to finally understand what it was to be satiated. The children, with their simple, strong desires, were the easiest to connect to. The pools were bait. The town went into panic. People tried to fill the pools with dirt. The dirt vanished, absorbed, and the pool reappeared, clearer than ever. They tried to pump the water out. The pumps screamed and burned out, and the water level never changed. We became prisoners in an ironic hell, surrounded by water we couldn't touch. The air grew drier. People reported waking up with cracked lips and a feeling of being drained. The children grew listless, drawn to the pools like zombies to a feast. The solution came from the last place we expected. Old Man Jenkins, who'd found the first pool. He was a descendant of the region's original settlers. He went into his shed and brought out an ancient, dried-up barrel cactus. He cut it open. Inside, protected for decades, was a small, leather-wrapped bundle. It contained a brittle journal from his great-grandmother. She wrote of the dry times in the 1880s, of voices in the wind begging for a drink, of her husband vanishing near a sudden, clear spring. The tribe that had lived here before them had a ritual. She'd scribbled in the margin, not to bring rain, but to console the thirst. It wasn't about giving water. It was about giving memory. That night, under a bloated moon, we didn't bring we brought stories. We gathered around the largest pool. We spoke, one by one, into the still, cold water. We talked about the joy of a cold drink on a hot day, the taste of watermelon, the feel of rain on parched skin. We poured our memories of satisfaction into the pool. The water began to shimmer. The lights deep below swirled. And for the first time, we heard the song the children talked about. It was a wordless, hollow melody, full of want. But as we spoke, it changed. It softened. It became a sigh. One by one, the pools began to shrink. not to drain, but to retreat into the earth, pulling back into themselves. As the last one in the Johnsons' yard dwindled to a puddle, a figure seemed to form in the water's reflection for an instant. Not a monstrous lady, but a woman made of dust and heat haze, her face peaceful, her eyes closed. Then it was gone. The puddle dried up, leaving only a circle of perfectly dry, sun-baked dirt. The drought broke 2 weeks later, not with a storm, but with a gentle, soaking rain that lasted 4 days. The children recovered. Timmy Gable still sometimes stares a little too long at a full glass of water, a faint echo of a song in his eyes. And we all have a new rule, passed to our kids into deserts. When you take a drink, you must always think of someone who doesn't have one. You must remember the thirst, so it never has to remember itself.